Hope everybody had a good 4th of July. On today's episode, we're talking about another kind of freedom from renting. Stay tuned. What's going on, everybody? Peter Toering here with the Homes Real Estate Podcast, talking everything southeastern Michigan real estate. Happy 4th of July yesterday to everybody. Hope everyone had a great Independence Day celebrating the freedoms that we have in this country. But let's talk about today a different kind of freedom, a freedom from throwing your money away every month on rent. We've gone through a detailed statistical analysis of the month-to-month cost of what it costs renting versus paying a mortgage. So statistically, the numbers are a little bit goofy, but generally speaking, you're going to pay a little bit more to rent. But as I was doing some research for this, I like to bring you a lot of hardcore numbers, statistics from verified sources. I was doing some research on this, and I came across one of the more idiotic articles that I've ever read. So I said, you know what? We're not going to talk the statistics today. We're just going to talk opinions, anecdotal evidence, which is not always the best argument. But hey, that's what we're doing. And if you don't like it, turn the podcast off. So we are talking about this article came from NerdWallet. Was how much more it costs to own versus rent in your state. They went through and they did the median rents and the median home ownership costs for every state. Michigan's sat at 52% more to own a home than to rent. So why is this idiotic? So let me tell you a couple things. Number one, even if this was true, even if it did cost you on a month-to-month basis, it cost you 50% more to buy, it still doesn't take into account that one of the biggest indicators in long-term net wealth is home ownership. It also doesn't take into account the stability that you have owning your own home versus, is your landlord going to kick you out? It also doesn't take into account building equity. It also doesn't take into account the tax deductions that you get. So even if that was true, still, renting, I think, is not necessarily the best option. And we have talked in the past, of course, there are situations in which renting is a good thing. But this is talking long term. So now let's look at why this article is stupid. Number one, median rents, especially in the state of Michigan, we're not making an apples-to-apples comparison here, guys. If we took the average home, like in Macomb County, average sale price $168,000. Let's take Macomb Township. It's somewhere in the high. I think it's like $260. So let's take your average 1,500 square foot ranch in, let's call it Macomb Township. You have a just for the sake of argument, a $230,000 sale price. Mortgage puts you somewhere at around $1,400 a month, $1,350, somewhere in there. Now, let's take that same home and let's look at the rental cost there. It's certainly going to be more than $1,300 a month. It's probably going to be $1,600 or something like that. So the reason that these numbers come out the way they do is your average mortgage is on a home. Your average rent in Michigan, your average rental is an apartment. So if you look, there are so many more apartments than there are rental homes. So it's not an apples-to-apples comparison. So I think a much more informative argument would have said, hey, let's look at least relatively apples to apples, like residential, single-family residences or condos, instead of saying, well, the median rent. So now we can take, I can take a 24-unit apartment building, look at the, everybody's paying $600 a month there, and we're going to use that towards the median cost to rent. I think that's a bit of a dishonest argument. So in addition to, again, the data being a bit on the odd side, they really don't go much into, they mention in one sentence the long-term financial benefits. So let's look at this. If you are renting right now, that money is going away, right? You're never going to see it again. It's going to your landlord, and it's gone. If you're having a mortgage, you're building towards equity. Like we mentioned before, you're getting tax deductions. You've got a little bit more security. But let's also look at this. The argument that I saw made in another article was that if if you put 20% down on a $200,000 home, here's the cost, and if you sell it in 5 years, here's this, and if you were renting at a similar mortgage and you didn't have the the additional homeowners insurance, you didn't have the maintenance costs, and you took that $40,000 and put it in some sort of investment, that here's where you'd be. And the thing that I'm looking at this and I'm saying, wait a minute. Number one, the vast majority of homeowners do not have to buy in with 20% down. Would be number one. Number two, if you look at statistically speaking, the vast majority of people of a higher down payment are not going to move in 5 years. 5 years in Macomb County, 5 to 8 years is your average first-time home buyer. Your second-time home buyer does tend to stay longer, meaning they're building more equity. And also, we've brought up the point that, well, maybe you'll make money on your home, maybe you won't. If you have the bubble bursts like we had here in 2008, 2009, that's certainly a concern, but we have to remember that on a long-term scale, real estate is an appreciating investment. So I think that these arguments that have been made about, I guess also, if you have $40,000 and you're going to put that in some sort of an investment fund, the stock market has the same volatility. That can go up and down. What if the stock market crashes? I guess we're seeing this backlash, and I don't think that the conventional wisdom of home ownership is it's going to make you incredibly wealthy. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there's certainly a lot of benefits to it, but it seems like we've swung the other way, and now home ownership is a financial fiasco. You should rent, and I just don't see all these benefits that are being stated. When we look at things in kind of this different lens, and also if we take away and we don't just look at what are the numbers, but I think the numbers are important, but we say, what else contributes to this? What about lifestyle? If you look at your homeowners, do you want to have control over when you want to renovate your kitchen or your bathrooms, or you want to paint your walls, you want to get new carpet, or whatever you want to do to make that house yours, you're going to be hindered by a landlord, or if they say yes, you can do this, now you're putting money into somebody else's home. The other funny kind of anecdotal argument I make is, if buying is so much more expensive than renting, how are landlords making any money? Right? Landlords a lot of them have mortgages on their properties. How are landlords making money if renting is so much cheaper than buying? This doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So, and again, if you look at just the numbers, you can say, median rent, yes, but also what's your quality of life? If you have a family with a couple of kids, do you want to be living in an apartment or do you want to be living in a home? So, I think this cost of ownership is a bit, like I said, a bit disingenuous. So just take these things with a grain of salt. Not to mention too, this article mentions, if you're repairing your home, a landlord comes out and does it. Well, wait a minute. You might also have a deductible that you're paying to a landlord. You're still doing maintenance. They said, well, you're your own gardener now. The vast majority of rental homes, you're doing this as well. So, again, I think some of these articles are a bit disingenuous in how they display this. We didn't bring the facts to you this time. We just brought the opinions. But in my personal experience, I do believe that if you can buy, you're going to be better off long term. Again, it's going to be a big indicator of your overall net wealth. And again, there's more stability that's brought in with home ownership. It's really worth looking into, guys. This is a great time to buy. There are more down payment assistance programs available than ever. We still have pretty low barrier to entry when it comes to mortgages, low down payments, fairly low credit scores. There's lenders approving down to 590. There's things that you can work out with your student loans. A lot of things going on here, guys. So if you would like to learn more about maybe purchasing a home, maybe getting out of this disgusting cycle of renting. I'm just kidding. Like I said, renting certainly has its place, but if you want to learn more, give me a call. My number's right there on the podcast. Love to talk to you. Again, Peter Toering, Realtor here with Coldwell Banker. And as always, please subscribe here if you're listening to SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, or Google Play. Also, you can find us on YouTube at the Homes Real Estate Podcast. You can find us on Facebook as well, Peter Toering Realtor, which is facebook.com/home in Macomb. Check me out on Instagram, Twitter, and the Snapchat as well. Thanks so much, guys. We will see you next time.